It is 20 to 8. There's loads of comments coming into us about a whole manner of different things, and we will get to those for you. We have a Friday Fire Pit still to come. We've Anna Capeless still to come to look ahead to the Ireland-England game this weekend, and plenty more as well besides. So do keep those comments coming into us. Before all of that, delighted to say we're joined on the line by the Examiner's GA writer, Maurice Brosnan. Good morning to you, Maurice.
Morning, lads.
How are you keeping? How are you keeping? Can you hear us?
I have you now, yeah. I have you.
Man. You're a United fan, somebody told me, is that right?
Adrian, I am just head in the clouds with GA coverage this weekend. I haven't had time to watch the game last night.
Well, I tell you what, we've a spare 20 minutes here if you want to pick through. Tell us, there's obviously so much to look forward to around the country the weekend. What's the game that you're most looking forward to?
I'd say from this weekend, I'd say Cavan Armagh, I think, could be a cracker. I really think that could be a blockbuster game. Going back to 2019, they went to a replay in 2019, two brilliant games. There's probably, in this brave new world we're entering, there's probably more on the line in that game than some other games. So if you go back to last weekend, for example, right, you could have made the case that Tyrone didn't seem too disheartened by losing to Monaghan. Fermanagh, even though they were technically in with a chance of making a Sam Maguire, they're on the dog side of the draw. That it was a really tough outcome for them to get there. Whereas materially, Cavan have a really good chance of making a Sam Maguire. They need to make an Ulster final to make that happen. Armagh's record in Ulster is awful. Like for 15 years now, I think they've won 7 games in Ulster and they've lost 14, drawn 2. That's including their win this year, obviously. They've never made an Ulster final. Every other team in Ulster has made an Ulster final in the last 15 years. So I think there's a huge amount on the line there, which the new buzzword in the last couple of weeks has been jeopardy. There feels like there's a good bit of jeopardy around that game.
Cavan remind me of my own county in an awful lot of ways, in that you never know. Even watch, I've been paying a fair bit of attention to Division 3, and you just never know from one week to the next. At one point it looked like they were going to run away with it, and then they got snaffled a little bit towards the end. So you have that, obviously a very good side on their day, of course, and you had Malachy O'Rourke saying during the week that he expects them to give Armagh a scare, but ultimately Armagh to get over the line. Is that the way you see it? Potentially,
yeah. The one thing about Cavan compared to, I think sometimes we find it hard to adjudicate on how athletically developed are certain teams. But then when you look at Cavan and the way they speak about Andre Quinn, they've got a full-time strength and conditioning coach there, a guy with a rugby background. And there is definitely, you see elements of that. You see, players who were wiped by Down in an under-21 game a couple of years ago come back and play Down again in a Division 3 game this year. And the athletic development, they were dwarfing guys. Like, there's something that's happened in the last couple of years that there's been a huge acceleration there. And I think that's critical in a game like this. Like, can you match up with Kieran Mackin and Jarly Oak Burns and Ben Creeley and all these incredible athletes that Armagh have around the middle third? So Cavan are a tricky matchup for Armagh. In saying that, I think Armagh probably have better players, but that hasn't got it done for them over the last couple of years. So I do think this is a crucial game for Armagh. I wouldn't buy into the idea at all that they might have an eye on trying to like a ball stretch. Ulster now, it has to be all about Ulster for Armagh, and based on that, I'd slightly shade it towards them, but I wouldn't be one bit surprised if this is a 1-point game or even a draw.
Do you think it's all about Ulster for them, or is it like get back to Croke Park and go one better from last year? Like, what's Geezer's mentality here?
Yeah, Johnny, but to what end though? Like, if you take your eye off this, the psychological damage of that, I think is criminal. Like, I really think it would, and particularly you have to take this in the context of coming off the back of what was a pretty poor league. Now, anytime you've spoken to Armagh coaches, they're fairly adamant that they didn't change their style, that it was down to execution, and if a couple of things had clicked. I have to say I don't see evidence of that. Watching with my eye, they were dropping off kickouts completely against Kerry up in Tralee this year. They didn't do that when they played Kerry last year. They were playing with maybe one up top a lot of the times. They weren't doing that last year. Rian O'Neill was out around the middle. He spent a lot more time up top last year. So from what I could see, that's not true. But it started to click towards the end of the league. I thought the best signs of their performance was actually the final game against Tyrone. They looked pretty good that day. Take it what you want against Antrim. I don't know how much you can read into that game, but they look pretty good there. I think psychologically a loss in Cavan and the wagon start to circle and all that sort of thing. I do genuinely believe it's a huge game for them.
Last one on that, the biggest frustration probably, and you're touching on it there from an Armagh point of view, is that sort of failure to take the shackles off, or whatever we want to word it, lack of attack in football, the inability to get ahead of the defensive wave almost, which I think against Antrim they seem to go for it a little bit more. I don't know if that's with no disrespect to them, but because they're playing Antrim, do you expect a little bit of a revert to type this weekend, or what will the Armagh approach be?
Oh geez, you'd hope so. Yeah, you'd hope so. Just because I would make for this game could be as entertaining as Tyrone Monaghan last week. I know that's a big shout, but just go back to how good that 2019 game was when Darren McVitie got man of the match. It was a genuine thriller. I have to say, maybe it's hard to read into the game. I know that, but even if you go back to their final league game when they were playing to try and stay up that day, they did kick the ball more. So there's elements of that. You go back to last weekend, or 2 weekends ago against Antrim, and you had Adrian Forker getting sidelines and lobbing, just floating. It was kind of an agricultural ball into the square, which broke kindly and netted into the goal chance. Kieran Mackin did it as well, just floating one off the outside of his right foot. So based off that, you would like to see kind of front foot football, and fingers crossed we get the game to match it.
Forget about Ulster, and we might forget about Leinster as well. What did you make of look at the Galway?
Hang on. Let's Jim McGuinness derby. We need to touch on before we do that on Sunday. What's going to happen?
A very similar game. I think for all the two teams were on kind of very different trajectories. Like for all down and out last year, there was disharmony around management. There was all this talk about. It was this time last year, I don't know if you remember, lads, with all this talk about the training camp that Donegal that started to come out. And then you flip it a year later, and suddenly Donegal have lost their manager, down of a new manager in their upward trajectory. There's a lot of hype around the way their 20s are playing. Even more interesting that they seem to be prioritising the tilted senior. I think from all that, there's two teams that are totally different trajectory. And you go back to that idea, it's kind of an immaterial thing. It's hard to put your finger on, but that idea of momentum, of a vibe, of a kind of the goodwill that's been generated, that seems to be all there for Down. It doesn't seem there for Donegal. So I would shade it towards Down. Plus the fact that they have a man in there who seems to know his own county pretty well, which has to be an advantage.
Yeah. Then on to Connacht before we move on to obviously
I don't even know if we're going to talk about Leinster.
Looking at league, that might be the third province at the moment. The Galway attack, right? Tierney, Heaney, Cook, Burke, Comer, Walsh, right? But I do want to get you on the goalkeeping situation, because we spoke about giving players confidence and all that, and this one probably was a tough one, to be fair. He's gone for power over I think Conor Gleeson does get a lot of slack, and Conor Gleeson's probably thinking, well, I've done enough to be picked here. He isn't, though.
Yeah. Johnny, you've hit the nail on the head there, and I think you kind of have to be conscious that, particularly if you're in the county here, there's two sides to this, right? There is I think Conor Gleeson gets totally unfair slack. I don't think this is a black and white decision that one is massively better than the other. There's a lot of subtle stuff that Conor Gleeson does that I don't think he gets enough credit for. It was pointed out to me recently that during the league he was actually kicking kickouts with his left and right foot.
Wow.
So it's really hard if you can get a press on a guy like that who's kicking dual-footed. It's a really hard thing to do. You can't read a guy's body position, and then it's a lot harder to get a press on. And then you've got situations where Galway are in a league final. A team who got to an Ireland final last year are Connacht champions. There should be a lot of goodwill around the team, and their social media accounts have to turn off comments because of the abuse that a guy's getting over selection. I think it's totally wrong. So you're kind of hesitant to wade into that. But just purely in a football sense, I think there's absolutely a case for Bernie Power to play. He was brilliant against Kerry. I think it's in many ways it's a nice decision to make. I think this reminds some people to get kind of a bad flashback to 2019, where Galway kept flicking between their goalkeepers and frequently would name one and then start a different one, which seemed to add more pressure. And it didn't always work out as well. Whereas I think this is a totally different scenario. I think this is two good goalkeepers. It's a nice choice to have. Gleeson got an absolutely boomer of a long kick out. I think Bernie Power, particularly against Kerry, was really good with those kind of short pipped ones. So it's interesting, yeah. It's very interesting that they went with Power, but I don't think the certain elements of discourse I think are very unfair around this, and you're kind of reluctant to get into that. So purely from a football sense, I can see the logic in going for Power.
I like the fact though that and Maurice would have seen, I would have seen Conor Gleeson back playing for Galway United, but on the Galway thing, I like the fact that Galway are just very much warned on what to expect from Roscommon here, from the league game in Pearse Stadium and also the game in Castlebar, obviously, where I just think Galway have the forwards to basically just overcome whatever scenario they're in here.
Yeah, and I think that league game in I remember I covered that league game in Pearse Stadium, and it was by a distance the worst game I've covered this year. It was just an absolutely dreadful game, and it was the angriest I've ever seen Joyce afterwards about the manner he'd been asked a couple of times during the league. Remember the end of the Mayo game when they failed to control the possession there, and it was a draw, and similar thing, they were up and didn't score for the last 20 minutes, and he kind of ceded there, right, there's something here that we need to fix, the way we're closing out games. And I think from that point on, Galway's trajectory has been kind of upwards. So I think that was a crucial league game. A couple of things within that game, which I think we'll see again this weekend. I mentioned this last time I was on the show that Conor Carroll, he's from Galway, he's an Omar Mary man. He played for Joyce under Galway under-20s before he transferred to Roscommon. He's got family in Roscommon. His uncle is the chairperson of Roscommon, but he went 100% long with his kickouts against Galway that day. I think they won't get as much joy out of that because Galway will be well warned about that. Since that Roscommon game, John Maher has been an unbelievable find in midfield for Galway. He'd be a nice foil there. The matchups in this game are still pretty good, I think. Like the two teams fit each other well, but yeah, I think there's no chance of a similar kind of uprising or heist or whatever you want to call it, where Roscommon come float in under the radar. Galway know exactly what we're going to get this weekend.
They won't get as much joy out of it, or they'll have a different tactic in terms of the Roscommon kick-out?
No, I from every soundings that I've seen, I don't think they'll change up. I think they trust in what they're doing, that they're fully. That's the one thing about David Burke's team. Like, they're fully, I think they have huge conviction in what they're trying to do. They know exactly. Totally. They're all on the one page, and
even against a big Galway midfield. Shane Curran was talking a good bit about it on the show yesterday. You just say that's it. This is our style, and on we go.
I think so. Yeah. No, the only thing in that is if Galway do. When Galway played Kerry, they started off that game. They were, flat to the mat. Two teams that seemed to suit each other really nicely. And then about 50 minutes in, Galway just decided have it and gave it up to Kerry short and said, "You can try and I think Galway are one of the best teams in the country out of possession. Like they're set
the best defence in the league, like."
And especially the way they're to free up John Daly. A lot of teams should look to that, Johnny, to see how they're managed to create that +1, trying to keep their, whatever you want to call their sweeper, free, so he can do that job. But so going back to that point, you could just drop off, give it to their full back line and say, you need to work that ball through every single line of us. And then in the face of that, I think it would be 99% of teams would do that. They would tap it to the cornerback. I think it would be very interesting to see would Roscommon still say, let's put it out on the middle. We might not win it, but we're not going to lose either, and just make it a dogfight out there. That'll be one curious thing if Galway decide to opt for that, which they've done a couple of times in the past. And some teams I think that's becoming that tactic is coming back in again. I watched it back, Longford and Offaly recently. Offaly totally conceded their kick out, like just said, you can have it short. So Longford ended up 100% on their own kick out, but they weren't able to work the ball forward. They scored 2 points after their own kick out that day. So if you can't work through every single line of defence, you're trying to run that ball every single time, it's a very different thing to do. So that's if that happens, Galway would do that, then it would be interesting to see how Roscommon respond. But under the premise that they go mano and big press, I wouldn't expect Roscommon to change.
When you're watching back replays of Longford Offaly, Maurice, you're in too deep.
Yeah. I first came across Maurice doing articles for the Go United match programme. He's actually gone up a level of like erudite nature in sports since like.
I actually mischaracterised him at the start to say he was a GA writer, which was totally underplaying his brief. Senior sports writer. You sounded like you were press ganged into agreeing with Johnny earlier on about Galway winning this one.
They're 4-9 favourites. Like Galway are heavy favourites here, regardless.
Well, everybody agrees with you, including Shane Curran yesterday. What do you think, Maurice?
Yeah, I think they're justifiable favourites. To be honest, do you go back to so I know they lost the league game, but you go back to the kind of final last year, was similar weather you'd hope to see in Pearse Stadium, and Galway carved them open. And the two key players for Galway that day were Homer and Walsh. Was the first time I think it was one of the very few times in their career that they both played well in the same day.
They didn't play at all in the league game. Like Homer came off after 10 minutes, Walsh wasn't playing.
That was the day he did his knee. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 6 minutes in, he collapsed in the square. But even you go back over the last couple of years, Johnny. Like there's a kind of a quirk of it that one of them plays well or the other plays well, but the All-Ireland final is a perfect example again. Like Shane Walsh was, as I let you get, they probably didn't happen for Comer. The semi-final was the opposite. You could argue, but that day against Roscommon, they were both brilliant. Comer, speaking of long kickouts, Comer was out around midfield. That was the way they started doing that Conor Gleeson boomer out, where he was kind of punching the ball on. I wouldn't be surprised to see that back this weekend. So, but the fact that the two of them are back in the field, they're both training. It sounds like everything from the soundings, Galway have been well worn. You see a lot of teams now doing these training camps. Galway out in Portugal, they're up in Dublin last weekend. The teams are all kind of opting for that. So I think they've been well worn. They're well prepped. I'd be eking that way, but I think this could be tight as well.
Yeah. a whole lot of players that are worth the entry fee alone to go in and see that one. That's the Hyde on Sunday
as long as
4 o'clock.
Roscommon don't decide to murder the ball in possession for 3.5 minutes without going anywhere. So it's over to you, Davey. You're not going to get away with that against Galway. It might work in Castlebar.
It won't be. Unfortunately, it won't be unique if they. You'll see plenty of that around.
But fully after the game, the Tyrone Monaghan game, I think the public won't really allow for that sort of stuff.
I think it's every game you see. It's an absolute curse. It makes you want to disappear for 10 minutes.
You do say this is off point. But do you bring in a time limit here on how much you can actually have the ball in one movement?
A shot clock.
Yeah, shot clock. You can't have 3 minutes of possession going nowhere. Now the game is evolving, but you want games like last Sunday, not the previous Sunday. Let's be honest, regardless of what the weather is.
I'm going to say that we'll come back to the shot clock at a certain point down the track, Maurice, because I want to ask you about Kerry Tip before we let you away. And the team, obviously, the Kerry team named last night, and of the 14 available from the starting 15 that won the All-Ireland last year, 12 start, and the other 2 are just coming back from injury. Obviously a mixed bag in the league, but this is an incredible statement of intent now from Kerry.
Yeah, go. Speaking of training camps, another team who took this break well, went away, seemed to be motivated very nicely. I think, Adrian, that a lot of teams, you apply an unfair bar certain to All-Ireland winners. Immediately they win in Ireland, and the next thing is, okay, now where's their improvement? Where's the level they need to get to? And I don't think, now you could say on paper there's a lot of good squads, and Dublin have recalled a lot of very talented players, but have you seen any evidence from the league so far that a team has it in them to go beyond what Kerry got to last year? So is the bar for Kerry not just to get to the same level of quality they got to last year, and they'll probably win an Ireland again? I think that there's an argument there. I also think they did their best to unearth 1 or 2 players, and just for bad luck or injury or whatever, it didn't work out. They tried to. I think there was a lot of hype around Stephen O'Connor, and they really pushed to get him back in the team. He was playing midfield. He was excellent at times during the league, and then just cruelly did his hamstring again and required surgery, and that's a real setback. Donald O'Sullivan's another guy actually who really struggled with hamstring injuries. I think Fon Fitzgerald had to reteach him his running mechanics, basically reteach him how to run. He was dogged by injuries. This is a guy in 2017, Kerry played Clare in a Munster semi-final, I think. Clare scored 3 points from play that day. Kerry beat them by 24 points. And David Clifford was playing that day, but the talk leaving after that game was about O'Sullivan, who was in beside him. I think he scored 2-8. So he's been a lot of hype around him since then. He finally we see that this year. He's on the bench. I wouldn't be one surprised to see him get more championship minutes. But by and large, yeah, it's the same bulk of what they had last year. And I think what harm, when you've, as I say, I don't see a team who's taken a huge step forward that Kerry, okay, now that's the level they need to reach. So until that happens, I think they're in a pretty good place.
It should have been Dublin with the players that they have from the semi-final last year, but it just hasn't really happened yet. No. And that's where we're at.
We'll talk about Leinster football when it gets interesting, which is once the Leinster Championship is over. Maurice, senior sports writer for the Irish Examiner. Thanks a million for jumping on. Enjoyed that.
Thanks, Les.
I tell you, the Galway United match programme has been some sort of platform
for
people. That's how I started, of a 16-year-old.
Two of the greats.
If you have a good English, insert eyes emoji here. But yeah, match programmes which are under extreme peril as well, might be on the way out.
Really?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It used to be like a quarter of the attendance would buy one, now it's more like a tenth.
How much are they?
Actually, the Galway United one last season was a £5. That was the last one I was involved in. It's too much.
How much is a ticket?
Tickets like 15, but now some other programs, the cost of print is really,
the programme shouldn't be a third of the ticket price.
No, they shouldn't. No, but this is the starting
I know what you're saying. It's
I saw all programs. I saw programs from the Roscommon Galway games in '98 that I wasn't even at, because I was away that summer in my house in Galway last week. So somebody, possibly me, decided that we're going to hold on to these programs because this could be a big year. That's like 1998, and I still have them. That doesn't matter if it's like something that's on your phone or it's on so to have that hard copies all these years later is amazing. And Owen Cowser did a piece from the week. League of Ireland match programmes are probably on the way out, and that's sad.